First of all, thanks for the invitation to come and speak today. We're trying to keep this informal and as interactive as possible. My name's Terry Kelly. I'm a Ph.D. organic chemist by training. I've spent 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry working as a medicinal chemist, primarily at Boehringer Ingelheim in the US and in Germany. The last 7 years, leading up to about 2010, I was the US Vice President for medicinal chemistry. So basically everything from screening to molecular modeling to protein crystallography to synthetic chemistry and all of the drug design pieces. During that time, I had the pleasure of hiring a number of very, very intelligent and engaged people, such as this gentleman to my left. And then in 2010, after he had left Boehringer, he did me the favor of helping me find my next job. So networks are extremely important in this business, and I cannot stress that. It's not a quid pro quo, but you find, and this is one of the themes that you'll see in the investor community especially, that people like to work with people they know and people they trust, and there's a familiarity. So please don't ever ignore your network. It's really your job security in the long run. But in 2010, I took over as the chief science officer of a biotech company called Comentis, which was working in cognitive disorders like Alzheimer's. And about 18 months later, I was asked to become the CEO, and I was the CEO of that company till about 2017, when, as often happens in the business, we had some problems in the external environment that dried up our funding. So essentially one of our major competitors working on the same mechanism had 2 failed phase 3 trials, and nothing sends money running for the hills faster than bad phase 3 results. So for the last 18 months, I've been working with a number of companies and venture firms in the area, in Boston and in Europe, to help them get their pitches together, to introduce them to investors, sometimes introduce them to pharma companies, and to basically consult and sit on boards. And that's what I'm doing right now. Roman?
Thanks, Terry. And let me join also in thanking the organizers for this beautiful symposium and in inviting me. My name is Roman Fleck. By background, I'm just like Terry, medicinal chemist, organic chemist. Trained at MIT, and then my first job was with PI, and I had the pleasure of working with Terry, where I basically learned the tools of the trade. And certainly this is the foundation of my experience, and I'm still drawing from that, so I'm really very grateful for that. I was with PI for some 7-8 years. Before then I kind of decided to switch to the dark side of the moon, meaning become a venture capitalist investor with an outfit called, at that time it was Index Ventures. That was still a mixed IT and life science fund based in Europe, in Geneva and London. And then it kind of, in 2013 to 2014, it kind of split out, where Index Ventures became Index Ventures IT, so the surviving entity focused on IT. And then the life science part became a new outfit called Medici Ventures. So if you come across those names, so that's kind of the history of that. So I continued with Medici Ventures, and as an investor, invested in all kinds of life science companies, 90% focused really on hardcore drug development. This is all that we do. And then in 2015, I came over to the US to jump on actually one of the Medici portfolio company I'm still with, called Janpix Inc., which is a small molecule cancer play. We hope to be in the clinic, similar actually to Sapiens, in the clinic next year. We are focusing there also on transcription factors, and this is 100% funded by Medici at this point. So yeah, so I draw a lot from the venture experience. That's where actually Comentis was one of our portfolio companies, and then Terry came on board, and it was a fantastic story. And yeah, so for the purpose of this discussion, we thought that we kind of split a little bit in two. So maybe I can start with the venture experience, how to find venture, and Terry was coming more from the operational side, how to, pick it up from there. What's really important for us, you really want to make this interactive so that, the reason why we don't have slides is because we don't really want to get stuck on something that's on slides, but rather also listen to you, your questions and so on, and sometimes, raising money and running a biotech company can be a fairly confusing project if you've not done it before. So we really make sure that you get the most out of that discussion and walk away with, some practical ideas and hints.
So again, if you have any specific questions, please don't be afraid to interrupt or put your hand up, and we'll call you. But I think what it all starts with, and I think the original title of this was something to do with innovation, and I think that obviously innovation is at the very, very start of anything that we do in the biotech industry or in any industry. And I think it's important to think for a minute or two about what is innovation and how do we define it. And then from the operational side, I can talk a little bit about how you nurture it and how you get the best out of people and how you can pitch it. And I think it would be interesting from Roman's side to give him the viewpoint from the investor of how does an investor value innovation and how do they interact with a company. But there are many, many types of innovations, and you can really sort of get caught up on the word. And I liked your slide with sometimes what you mean is not what you think it means. But there are clearly for us scientific innovation that can be translated into human therapeutics is the core value of our innovation. But I grew up in the pharmaceutical industry in the 1990s and the early 2000s, where we were being bombarded with so many game-changing technologies that people always promoted as innovation. And in a lot of ways, there were process innovations, there were technological innovations, but nobody sort of stopped to think that, okay, are those innovations that we're actually selling? We're not a technology company, we're a pharmaceutical company. We can use these innovations, but they're not what we're selling as an innovation. And you can really sort of let the technological innovations take you away. On the investor side, there are a lot of financial innovations out there. There, from everything from what you see with hedge funds to the investment model that Medici or Index pioneered, sort of being this single asset model, which really are innovations which we should be aware of, just like as scientists, we're aware of the technologies. As biotech entrepreneurs, we should also be aware of the financial innovations that are out there, because it's the lens by which investors are looking at whether you fit into their portfolio. So remember what you do. Remember that your innovation is science. Your innovation is bringing a drug to the market. But be aware of the other things that are going around you and the other types of innovations that can help you get there faster. It doesn't change your core practice, but it allows you to see things in different lenses. So you want to talk a little bit about Medici and how you look at investments?
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of different investment models there are, because it's very important when you have your project and you figure out who to approach as an investor, that you are in your search for the investor as focused as the other way around. The investor looks for projects that are a good match. There's nothing more dilutive than approaching the wrong kind of investor, nothing more frustrating. It really doesn't help anybody. So the Medici model is basically, as Terry mentioned, called an asset-centric model. What the idea behind was to really look at the whole drug development process and really strip it down to its most essential parts. And what is really the essential part that needs to be in a company? There are two things. Somebody who is holding it together and somebody who is the brain behind it. Everything else can be outsourced. And that's really kind of the model that allows you then basically to run a biotech company with two people. Now that is obviously not satisfying, because you outsource most of your things. But if you think about the two core things that you need to have in your company is the brain behind it and the one who can be the face with the investors, with partners, with the financial community, and so on. Now, this is the one extreme side of the model. The other extreme is, let's call it, I always use Third Rock Ventures as the other extreme side. Let's throw $50 million. Let's have big vision, a big platform company that can develop multiple assets. And again, these are the two extremes, and either model can be successful. Either model can return money to the investors, to the limited partners of the fund, and either model is right for a certain type of situation. And maybe as we go along, we can talk a little bit about more, how you find out and how you approach the right kind of investors at the right time.
And I think that's an important part, is what are the types of investors? I mean, obviously, when you think of biotech, you think of VCs or you think of IPOs. That's really very, very limited in scale. I think from a CEO role, you really want to be very careful. I mean, obviously, you're doing things because you're doing things the way your investors agree. I mean, it's your job as the CEO to put down a strategy, be operational, and to promote and to keep your investors informed. But at the end of the day, everyone has a boss, and if you're not lined up with your investors, at the end of the day, as the CEO, you're going to lose. And by lose, I mean you're going to lose your job. It's a fact. So you really want to be very careful about picking your investors. You really want to be careful about your early stage dilution. You really want to put off significant investment until you've really exhausted almost all of your other non-dilutive sources of funds. NIH grants, commercial development grants, any money you can get your hands on to move your company further. Because when you actually have to now go out and raise the $5 to $10 million to bring something into the clinic or to bring something through the next value inflection point, that's going to be expensive money. That's going to be coming from the VCs probably. And that is expensive money. It's going to be very dilutive. You're probably going to lose control of your company because VCs are not going to invest in your company unless they can basically have a strong say in how things get done. And so there's going to be a control issue there. So you will get less dilution the further along your program is. So the longer you can put off that as a CEO or as an entrepreneur, the longer you can shoestring it or bootstrap it, you're better off.
I sort of agree with you, coming, of course, with the VC hat. So I think what Terry said is right. So the most important thing is that you exhaust all kind of funding, non-dilutive funding opportunities as you go along, because the further along you bring your project, the more attractive it becomes to any kind of investors. That's for sure. And maybe let's say a couple of words about how to find them, how to find those investors, because it will also tell you when to find them and how to really understand, what they're good and what you're, when you get in bed with them, what you're up to with them. Now, the key thing here is that, as I said, you have an innovation, you exhausted all your funding sources, and now you're looking for the next bigger round of money. So number one, there's this old saying in the industry, don't raise money when you really need to raise money. So this is the number one lesson that I can tell you. Start raising money when you don't need it, okay? So that A, puts you in a very different negotiation position, that B, doesn't make you look desperate, and that, gives you a very different, you will interact with these guys differently. And it's all a game, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's really a game, a chess game, how you play it with the VCs, and same way, other way around, how you play it with the CEOs, right? So, you want to start raising money when you still have grants and whatever non-dilutive money, supporting you, and then maybe a year or two into that, you know, you already know, you know, you start looking for the right investor, and you will zoom in on somebody. Now, the big thing is that you choose your investor just as much the investors will choose you. So there's really a lot to be said about that the investors, that there's chemistry with investors. Believe it or not, as simple as that. You know, that you like them on your board, or you don't like them. Can you imagine working with them for the next 4 or 5 years? You think they're a bunch of a-holes? You know, probably not, right? Yeah. And I mean this in very honestly, right? You know, there may be chemistry and maybe not chemistry. If there's no chemistry, walk away, because your life is going to be miserable. And I can tell you, I've seen so many companies going down because the board was squabbling, because there was tension between CEO and board. And I think that's something
and I would also add, make sure, if you have different investors, make sure they get along. Because yes, having lived through a situation where that was not the case, it adds paralysis to decision making, and it's very difficult, right?
Absolutely. There's a question.
I'm gonna ask a question while we're getting the microphone here. First of all, we've been talking to a lot of other markets like Pittsburgh and Massachusetts, other parts of Massachusetts and so on, and everyone says that when collaborations fall apart, it's just because the people can't get along with each other. Everything else can be solved easily. But the question I wanted to ask Terry is that you kind of glanced in this in your comments and about learning from other fields and other industries. Can you just say a little bit more about maybe an experience you've had where you've found something that worked somewhere else and was adaptable to working in your companies?
Okay, sorry, drawing a blank. But obviously,
put you on the spot,
maybe Roman as an example. But I think that there's, look, I would make it more broad. I think that one of the keys to successful innovation in our industry or in any industry is that you have to hire clever, curious people, and you have to nurture that curiosity. And that curiosity is not just focused on the one scientific problem that they're trying to drive, but the curious people just want to learn, and it just makes interacting with them. When I was running a big group, I always had, you'd ask people about their manager and you would get 2 answers. They were either hands-off or a micromanager. I mean, it's really kind of a big spectrum when you think about it, right? But in reality, the best managers, they weren't really hands-off. They really didn't micromanage, but they engaged people. They talked to them. They showed curiosity in their projects. And I think that that's a best practice that you see in any industry in terms of bringing the best out of the people. Hire curious people. Keep them engaged, because if you keep them engaged, you can sort of keep them focused, but still giving them enough error bars in terms of their daily work to find something and do something great. Sorry, I wish I could have come down to one specific bullet point, but I danced around it.
Invariably, as an innovation is moving forward, you hit that period where you're in a messy middle. And often it's about company growth and the potential for company growth, not just the great idea. As investors, how do you look at that messy middle? Do you say, oh my goodness, it's getting real messy down there, it makes me nervous, so it's time to slow down and figure out where my exit is, how far I want to go with this? Or do you, as investors, start to say, you know what? They're in that messy middle. I think we need to give them a little bit more assistance in this direction or that direction so that they can get past this and go to the next phase.
Sure. Thanks for the question, because it kind of feeds right into my pitch, why you would want to work with, and I really mean with experienced venture investors, meaning investors that do have experience in starting biotech companies. And you may think that sounds arrogant or whatever, but it's easy to find money. So to find money for a biotech company is actually not so difficult. There's so many people out there, funding sources, but to find experienced money, that's a challenge. And the reason why you want to have experienced money is really because they've seen it. They've seen all the issues, all the messy things you're talking about, all the value of death, and they know how to walk you through that. They know how to bring in the right people to make it happen. They have enough deep pockets to fund you through that. And they have the experience to put you then in touch, at the end, with the right people to make it a successful exit or a pharma or an IPO and so on. So the investor should not only bring money.
Yes.
Experienced investors bring a lot more than money. That's why it's expensive. Honest, it's okay. And that's why they also like to have control. Because if you're not so experienced as a CEO or as a CSO or whatever of your company, you probably may make the wrong decisions. And people are so in love with their babies that they say, oh, well, what these investors say, it's all nonsense. So that's why you need to have control in order to override those kind of strong sentiments. But an experienced investor will bring a lot more to the table than just cash.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think having good investors who have a network, who have been there, who have the patience and have the judgment to realize when it's a bump in the road versus when you're driving off a cliff, that's really important. And the other thing good investors will do is they will not be afraid once the time comes to say, okay, guys, it's over. We can't. You always think, okay, well, they just invested 10 million and the company's not going anywhere. We can't raise the next round. The science didn't work out. It's part of their model. I mean, nobody likes to lose money. They have a job. They're in it to return money to their limited partners. But losing 10 million is better than knowing you've lost 10 million and putting another 10 million on top of it. That's just insane. So you basically, good investors will also act as a fair reality check on the company's strategy and on the company prospects.
And it's not only that, it's really also the validation that comes along with them. Like, you have one of the big name blue chip investors in your company, your fundraising is taken care of.
Yep.
And being put in front of the, heads of R&D at Pharma is taken care of as well, right? So that is really the value that they bring to the table.
So you mentioned earlier that there's a spectrum of types of investors. Medici's at one end, very asset-focused, build a small company, outsource everything. I think you said Red Rock Ventures.
Third Rock Ventures.
Third. Is it obvious, if you're a startup out there looking for money, is it obvious which investors are in which place? So if you're a CEO trying to raise money, you know where to go. So if you want to do it the lean way or you want to do it the big company way?
Yeah, it should be. So, on the one hand, you say you have a platform that can, do multiple drugs. We wrote this question earlier about Sapiens. Investor like Medici may not be the right one, but you have, where you say, I have one drug, and that could be developed into something. But that leads me into, let me explain to you a little bit better how to get in touch with the VCs, right? And that's something I wanted to really, for you to take home, because it's not that you send a business plan to Medici, the info@medici.com, and then you hope to get a reply, right? It's not how it works. And again, this is a process, right? It's not that, you send a fancy slide deck and then somebody writes you a check. It's obviously not happening either that way. And so there's a lot of networking, and it's up to your own creativity how to network yourself towards the VCs and have the discussion. Hey guys, I'm working on XYZ, is it something that you would be interested in? The answer is most likely yes and no, right? So you will never get a real answer from a VC, but you have to start learning their language a little bit, right? A VC will never say, I'm not interested in this. Very rarely. Nor will they say, oh wow, this is super hot, I will, jump on this again. So you have to be a little bit nuanced how you understand their language. But nevertheless, talk to somebody, a big shot professor who had done companies before. Can you get an introduction? Somehow manage to talk to the right people. Try to find the partners in the fund, because the associates are the one who are doing the work, but the one who's really making the calls are the partners. Try to network yourself to them, and then to find the respective fund. Again, you have to familiarize yourself with the industry, which is not an easy thing to do. But it's worth every penny doing this. Hanging out at the right conferences, trying to find these guys. Again, do not do any cold calls. Do not send any cold emails. because it's not only, you will not only get a not return, but you will actually hurt yourself. Because if somebody sends to me a business plan, it's like, really, you don't have better ways to get in touch with me? You've never talked to me before? Wow, that's really lame, let's put it this way, right? You know, so you really need to be a little bit more creative how to get to show. But this is how the game works, right? You know, you need to find them and then talk to them, understand, you know, what their needs are. And again, you know, I just said these two extremes. You know, there's all shades of gray in between, right?
And I would also throw just something on top of that, because I think that this is a real reality check that as a scientific entrepreneur you have to ask yourself is, am I the person who likes to go out and network? Am I the person who loves to stand in front of a group and talk? Am I Michael Welling, right? So, or am I the person who really loves the science and I like talking to scientists and I really am uncomfortable negotiating or uncomfortable talking about money? And if that's the case, find yourself an experienced CEO and work with them. There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to have a much better chance of success because you have to learn. And you know, we're both card-carrying organic chemists. Okay, we're science nerds. It is not easy to transform yourself into outgoing, you know, flesh-pressing businessman who's basically talking people up when you know it's not going to go anywhere. But any conversation you have, even if you know it's not going anywhere, it should at least open the door for somebody else. Well, do you know anybody who does it? But you have to really practice your networking skills. And if that's not working for you, partner with somebody who can do it.
Maybe on that line, there was one comment that I picked up from your presentation, which was loose lips sink ships, right? Don't take it too much to your heart when you talk to VCs. And you know, this is not the Shark Tank, and this is not you know, talking to the locos or to the whatever nice names they have for people in our trade. You know, one thing that's really a turnoff is I cannot really talk about this. This is confidential, right? In the first meeting, right? Either don't even go there, mention it. Just, you know, don't send out, you know, we distrust you, because after all, these are very professional people, and you know, they would never take your idea and run with this if they're professional, if you talk to reputable funds. So if you then extend this kind of distrust to them, it's a major turnoff.
Yeah, and I would also say that don't be surprised if you're talking to a VC and they won't go under CDA with you, at least not until you get further down the dance floor, right? So really what you have to do, and talk to an IP attorney about this, is really think about what do I have to protect here? In general, you don't have to, at least I'm a small molecule person, so realistically I can show my potential investors any result on anything as long as I don't show them that structure. Because that structure is what I own, and that structure is really, and frankly, they're not going to want to see it. They're going to want to see, what does it do? Can you make it? Is it proprietary? And if you can answer all those questions in the early meetings, you'll get down to the point where, okay, now we're in full diligence, we're under CDA, you know, we have to see everything. And so be realistic. These are professionals. They're not going to run away with your material. If you're not disclosing anything that's proprietary, just be realistic with yourself. And also, protect it, right? File your patents early. You have 18 months before they become public. So just realize, take advantage of that 18 months. Well, yeah, the problem with the CDA is you're going to have to litigate it.
Yeah. How are you going to afford lawyers?
Exactly.
The CDA isn't going to protect you.
I mean. And that's the reality check, right?
But I think, you know, the key lesson is here is, you know, don't play hardball with your potential investors.
Build a relationship first.
We have walked away from deals because the CEO thought that, you know, he needs to be, you know, also playing at the same level and play hardball, and then if you have the sense that there's no way that you come to, you know, meeting of the minds, no matter how beautiful your technology is, no matter how beautiful your science is, or your molecules, people will walk away. I mean, just to give you a sense, you know, at Medici we had a deal flow of between 500 and 1,000 projects per year. So, you know.
And how many were funded?
5. So, you know, basically the metric is 90% gets weeded out on the spot. So they're basically just not fitting into the policy, nutraceuticals, medical devices, and what have you. People who send you a business plan by email. So that is part of that. So that leaves us, you know, 50 to 100 projects where you actually really do the work. And again, then out of those 50 to 100 projects, there's only a, you know, less than 10% chance of those making it. So, and again, you know, you have to somehow come up with proxies. You know, it's like, oh, difficult team. Next one. So, you know, things can go quickly, can go south very quickly for reasons that you may not anticipate. And it's very, very difficult for VC. By the way, you know, we have changed, and then, you know, actually, you know, there's a different plan now, and blah, blah, blah. Forget it. You know, once the VC has said, you know, this particular opportunity, these people, and so on, you know, I don't want to work with, it's usually the end of the story. Very, very rarely, and I mean very rarely, you manage to come back and say, by the way, you know, the story has changed so significantly that I think you should have a second look. Happens, but not very likely.
And that only happens if you know the people, right? So again, it's not going to happen a second time through a blind email. But if you have people and you have good relations with them, you can at least, and you can do it informally, right? You can just say, take a look at this. Is this worth repitching? So
it's,
Yep, so I've got a question around geography. So obviously without the science and without the actual money, this entire conversation becomes moot. But there's an old adage that too much distance or not enough distance are both equally bad. 5 years ago, I think a lot of startup biotech companies felt or were certainly being charged with having to relocate to where their investors are. How much does where your money is based and where your company is based, how much is that a factor these days with technological innovations and communications and the ability to bring everyone together much easier?
I'll talk about it operationally. I personally think that in reality, it's not that big of a deal. I ran Comentis from Ridgefield, Connecticut. Comentis is, and from basically Frankfurt, Germany for 5 years. Comentis is based in South San Francisco. So you just have to be on top of it. You have to know the people, and you have to have people who can work by themselves. That said, I've also been in discussions within the past year with a VC who basically said, no, I want a brick and mortar building in Boston because I believe the water cooler conversations are essential for driving this. So I think a lot depends on the stage of the company. A lot depends on how comfortable people are. But I think in general, you want to have people close. There is a lot to be said about interactions, but you have to figure out how to establish those interactions and how to work together. It's more work when it's remote, clearly.
So from an investor point of view, there are two sides to it. So on the one hand, so for one, there are different types of investors. So you go to, you know, Atlas in Cambridge, you say, you know, I don't want to walk across the river even. Or, you know, like Medici in Geneva, where you just don't have the same kind of ecosystem. We were on the plane all the time, right? And again, it depends on, you know, who are you talking to. And again, you know, you always come back to find the right investor that's a good match for you. Now, there is something to be said about face-to-face meetings, which no teleconference, which no video conference can substitute. You can feel the people, right? You can feel when they're bullshitting. You can feel when they're honest. You're not going to see this on the video conference, right?
You can have a drink with them and bond. Right?
And bond, exactly. And so this is extremely important. So that's why you know, you waste your time in board meetings, not in calls, because, you know, you have the opportunity to be with each other and to grow together professionally, right? So it is very important. So depending on whether the venture guys, you know, like to travel or not, I think the only thing to be said is a face-to-face board it cannot be substituted by anything. It's really extremely important to make that happen, and hopefully these guys show up, more often than that. Now, of course, the more familiar you become, the less and less, the more and more you can substitute it, with the calls and so on. But at least at the very beginning, when you really don't know each other that well, face-to-face meetings are not substitutable.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, everyone.